LinkedIn. I am so happy to be here live with Ed Porter. And so let me know where you're coming in from. And thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about creating inclusive sales cultures, which you know I'm all about. Ed, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. This is a topic near and dear to me. And when you started doing these events, I wanted to just figure out how I could be a part of it. So I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you reached out. We know each other from Girls Club, right? And
yes.
I've been following you for a while. I always thought of you as one of those leaders that just sort of is with it, who is sort of setting that example for other people. And I think that's amazing. But for the folks who don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I'm currently working as a fractional chief revenue officer. I've been doing this for about a few years now, and really started to gravitate to this as I've spent my 20-year career in different customer-facing organizations. I kind of grew up in the outsourced contact center space where we handled inbound, but also did some outbound work as well. I managed a team that did predominantly inbound sales and then started to dabble in outbound. So that's really where I cut my teeth in my 20s. And then just kind of went from there into different areas, went into a software company and built the channel program. So learning sales and selling through the channel and indirect channel sales is a monumental task. And I was glad I got the experience. It was certainly figure it out. And that the company, we all just kind of wore every hat and tried to figure it out, to eventually that company wound up selling 100% of all of their products through the channel. So learned channel sales, then went and built an inside sales team for a large field sales organization where in the interview process, they said, we don't really know what we want or what to expect, but we've heard a lot about this inside sales thing, and our competitor is predominantly inside sales. So we need to get on the ball and figure it out. And I really loved that because they saw a need and they wanted to bring somebody in to really own it. And they were kind of going to get out of the way, which I love to hear. So I came into that company and built an inside sales team, and like to think that there was a really good lasting impression there. And even today, there may even be some of them that are joining this, but even today, they're really looking at inside sales as a strategic differentiator. Obviously, with COVID and field sales kind of being put on pause and halting last year, this is really a good go forward plan. So I did that, and then was recruited to go become the CRO for a startup where they had aspirations of being acquired, and they wanted to get acquired as quick as they could. So that was really my task, was to just turn the ship around and start to just add users and save users. So ultimately, we sold the company, and that I wound up going off on my own at that point, and then tried to figure out this whole, what is a CRO? What does this mean? What is a revenue organization? And I'm learning a lot more now that there's a lot of confusion in the market about what is a revenue organization? What is a chief revenue officer? Is it just a chief sales officer and just a new name? Does it own sales marketing? Does it own sales marketing and customer success? And there's a lot of these inconsistencies out there. So I've kind of made it a passion of mine to help educate myself and continue to learn this thing called revenue alignment, and then start to help clients as they're starting off or they're building and growing, to look at the full customer landscape and look at aligning marketing, sales, and customer success, and figuring out how do you go forward and accelerate revenue growth.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fantastic, because we all know the silos that we don't want to talk about exist, right?
Yes.
And that those silos can break down organizations, from their messaging to how they're able to service buyers throughout their organization, and to the very experience that they generate, when they're talking to people, when they're talking to their customers. All of those silos create friction in the sales cycle, and it's a real problem. So glad you're helping fix it.
Yes.
We've got some great people joining us. We've got Catherine, which we were just talking about Catherine earlier.
Yes.
So I'm so glad she popped in here. Hi, Catherine. We've got Dale, who is also in Florida. If you don't know Dale, he's pretty great. Got Melissa. I see so many people looking to inside sales now to learn from, now that everyone is working from home. That is true. I think as we've all made this transition, especially people who used to be in the field to now being at home, that transition is really inside sales. And how do inside sales do it? And how do field salespeople adapt, right? That adaptability is super important. Jonathan's joining us. Hi, Jonathan. I'm always happy to see you. Shannon from Columbus. And
hey, Shannon.
Shannon
is on my is one of my partners in crime in the Columbus AAISP chapter. So she's one of the officers here with me in Columbus.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she's a founder of an organization she's a co-founder of Columbus Women in Sales. So a group that really just kind of started a few years back. And she was one of the founding people to help bring this up and corral everyone together and start talking about the issues. I believe Lauren Bailey spoke at an event, possibly Lori as well, Richardson. So I mean, they've had some good success there in that group. So hi, Shannon.
Yeah, happy to see Shannon. Dale says, Ed, this is a great topic. What is a CRO? There's so many streams of revenue. That is a great topic, but not quite our topic today. Though we could touch on it more at the end. What I wanted actually to get into was to talk about why you chose to invest your time in Girls Club, at least at first. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mentioned AAISP, so I've been part of AAISP when I was building that inside sales team years ago. That's when I found AAISP, and I started attending their annual leadership conference, and I got to meet Lauren Bailey, and it was at one of those leadership conferences where she announced this, and it was really an idea that started to come to fruition, and she started talking about a lot of the problems. And as a white male, it was one of those things that kind of hit me in a different way to start to think differently. And as soon I stalked her after that session, because I followed her and said, hey, what can I do to help? And I had known her probably more informally over the previous years, but I just said, hey, I want to help and I want to do what I can, and wound up sending somebody that was on my team through the first program, through Generation 1. Shout out to Kristen Lang if you're here. So she went through the first generation, and that's where Lauren said, you can help be a mentor. And that was my first just foray into it. And I just wanted to help be part of the solution. And there's a difference between vocalizing a problem and dwelling on a problem, but the other part of it is really the solution. And how I wanted to help was the idea of Girls Club was to provide avenues for women who were at the time either aspiring to be managers or were pretty new within a year of being a manager. And it was trying to get content that Lauren was providing through her company Factor 8, as well as external resources, thought leaders, mentors, to help just be a voice. And that was one of the things that I loved. I had a great protege, Julia Bourne, who was just a phenomenal manager. She was very new in her role, and I was lucky to get partnered with her. But it was great to just be able to kind of relive the starting points of what I got into management and how I had to kind of fall on my face. And now this is an avenue where I can help people prevent that. And that was one reason why I wanted to help. And the other reason was when Lauren started painting some of these challenges in the industry with inequity, and I'd kind of more so heard about pay inequity, but when you start looking into how many people in leadership and what diversity means and inclusion, and a lot of these major companies are starting these DE&I committees, and it becomes a little bit more of an awareness, and I wanted to be part of it. So that's initially why I got connected with Lauren, got joined, and just raised my hand and said, how can I help?
Yeah, I mean, and that's great. And Kristen Lang has joined us. She
Yay.
said, hi, Ed,
Kristen.
love Girls Club. Thanks for the opportunity. And Dale says action over words, which 100% true. Very interesting that Ed wished to hear women's perspective. That is interesting because so many times, they don't, leaders, male leaders specifically, don't particularly want to hear a woman's opinion. I remember my very first meeting where I got a seat at the table, and here I am already. I got my PowerPoints and I got all my data. I'm so excited. I'm just waiting patiently for my turn. And then it was my turn, and they said, "Oh, wow, the meeting is over. We've run out of time. Maybe you can talk next time, Jen." And just the stab to the heart of like, man, my very first one. Come on, guys.
Right.
And I can tell you, I didn't get any time the next time either. But that's the reality of the situation. You end up. Sometimes it's really hard to tell, and sometimes you'll end up in an environment where you don't get the support that you hope for. And, I'm lucky because I know what great leadership looks like for male leaders. Like, I've had some really great leaders in my career, and I've had some really crappy ones. But, how can we create more inclusive environments? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on things that male leaders can do to create better environments.
Yeah, this is what I love talking about, and it's it's really hard to change a habit. So if your habit's been formed or you've been conditioned to operate a certain way, it may very well be an unconscious bias. And I hate throwing the word bias out there because it's sometimes certainly unintentional, but sometimes that's even the hardest one to solve. And I look back to when I was in my 20s and I was running a department for the first time. I was probably 23 years old and had 4 or 5 supervisors that were reporting to me. And then they each had maybe 10 or 12 agents. But I looked at my supervisor's staff and I had an amazing amount of diversity. And I just looked at that saying, well, that's interesting. And then I started looking at other programs in the company, and it certainly wasn't that way. And that's when I really started to understand why, like, what was it? And some of the people I hadn't hired directly, they were there prior to me. And so I'm certainly not boasting that, but that was kind of my first realization that something was different. And I didn't know that I don't know that I really had an opinion back then of, is this good or is this bad? Is this intentional or not? But it was just something I noticed. And that kind of filter or that thought process, that ability to pause and identify, is something that's really stuck with me ever since. And when I look at even webcasts that people are posting, I look at the panel and I look at the topic first, but then I look at the panel, and if I see older white guys with ties and suits, not that I'm necessarily taken aback, but I just wonder why. And that's where I think is this inflection point of being aware. And I don't want to claim one is right or wrong, but it's just simply the awareness, and it's looking at a team and looking at the diversity. And it's visual, yes, but then also experiences too. I don't want to just say, diversity and inclusion is just about race, gender, age, or what have you, but it also is experiences. And I'm very passionate and vocal about, I can't stand when companies want to hire people that come from SaaS. It's frustrating to me because SaaS is a business model. And if you're hiring people that have that experience, all you're doing is limiting. Why not bring in people from other walks of life who have sold services, who have sold CapEx purchases? Bring that thought into your team and help create that diverse team. I don't want a team that just looks like me. I don't want a team that just looks either age, race, or experience. I don't want people that are just coming from my own walks of life. So I think that becomes the first part, is really the awareness of, what do I want in a diverse team, and making sure that I'm doing an adequate amount of bringing in diversity from gender, from race, from age, from experience, from different walks of life, and look at your team to say, yes, Jen comes from this industry. She can help here. She's the only one that maybe came from the education space or came from the services industry. Those are things to really hone in on, instead of be an outlier and embrace that. So kind of went off a little bit of a tangent there, but I think the starting point is just awareness first, is be aware, and then start to work through the why.
Yeah, it kind of makes me laugh a little because when I see those job ads that are like SaaS specific experience,
Oh,
I'm like, there's really no difference between this predictable revenue model and like liquor inventory. Like there
right.
is like no
It's
difference
systemic.
between liquor
Absolutely.
inventory and the
Right.
predictable revenue model. Like,
Yep.
absolutely
And
none.
I've asked the question several times, and I got an answer that actually I can get behind. It was in a LinkedIn discussion thread, and it had to
Hmm.
do with ramp up. And it was like somebody that comes from the SaaS world understands a bit of the transactional piece of it, understands the ACV, and that helps for ramp up. And while I can get behind that a little bit, it becomes a band-aid to say, so you basically just don't have a great training program. And no offense, because there's plenty, training is tough. Training is really hard, and it is really tough to get a good. I came from a company that it was tough to build a training process, so I get it. So that I can understand, but other than that, it's a business model. It's a monthly payment, or translated into annual agreements. It's a financial transaction. It has nothing to do with how you're selling it, who your buyer persona is, how are you creating messaging that relates to them, whether you've sold a $10 million one-time deal or if you sold a service as opposed to a product. I just don't get it, and I haven't been able to really be convinced that it's necessary. And again, kind of the same thing as building these diverse teams is I want to embrace people from the outside of my industry, outside of sales even. I've got
Hmm.
a friend that we've been meeting regularly for cigars, Matt Mulvane, if you're out there, how's it going? But he touts one of his SDRs. She came from the education space. She was a teacher, had no sales experience, and she is killing it
Hmm.
right now. And she's doing a bang up job. And that can happen. And you can put people in a seat and you can give them training and support. And that's what performance is all about and success is all about. That can come from any walk of life. That can come from any age, gender, race, you name it. You just have to have the support to do it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. My best SDR ever was in college. I had hired him like part-time in the evenings to be able to cover the West Coast. But he was like a sponge and he would take everything in, and he turned out to be like the best SDR. And
Yeah.
he came from hospitality. He was like a host of a restaurant and was just, always going after it and always with this service mindset of making sure that, his response time is super quick and that he got back, just always on it. And
Mm-hmm.
I so appreciated that about him. Dale is making fun of me because I'm comparing liquor with
The
revenue.
liquor with revenue.
Well,
Yeah.
ask any bar manager, liquor is revenue,
And
that's
it's like
where
a
the
3 or
revenue.
4 time markup too. It's insane.
Fresh eyes and perspectives and transferable skills equals a win. And I 100% agree. So we compared liquor, right, to predictable revenue. I would love to see a sales leader come up with the dollars per square foot when they had an office, because that's what retail managers do. If you want to talk about transferable skills, they would have to be able to say how much revenue they were making per square foot, taking into account the staff, the time, the rents, everything. And so these other areas, other, industries have a wealth of knowledge that people haven't even really started to tap into because of their limiting beliefs about what people can do and what they can achieve. And it's kind of sad, really, because they put limitations on people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how many times I've sort of felt like you've made a decision about what I can do and how much I can achieve and what I can't do. And it's, that's what I think inclusion is really giving people an opportunity to shine and do their best work and bring their whole selves, because they know more about all kinds of things you may not realize.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data out there supporting that. And I'm going to date myself a little bit, but many years ago, I'll say. I was in grad school and I was working at the outsourced contact center back then, and I did a dissertation on employee turnover. And of course, I selected in the contact center because it was it was where I was working, and it's a huge problem. And it still is today to an extent, is employee turnover. And you look at the reasons why people leave and the reasons why people stay. And the top two reasons why people leave are their relationship with their manager and the environment that they're part of. And when you look at, if those are the reasons why they leave, how do you help support that? And you build a culture of empowerment. So like what you said, is it's allowing people to shine. And that requires, a little bit you're hiring people with brains. So let's put that to work and let's garner ideas. Let's be innovative and let's talk freely and openly. And it doesn't mean we got to listen to every idea and execute it, but I should say we should listen to ideas. It doesn't mean we have to execute every one of them, but these are how problems are solved. And if you can empower teams, regardless of the level, entry level all the way up to executive, if you can build a culture of empowerment, that's going to help. And being empowered isn't just, new employees or old employees that are tenured employees. And it's really taking that same practice and leveraging across all the teams. That was one of the things that I've enjoyed doing. Is I like debating. I like arguing. I will defend stances, and I will go in and saying, I don't know enough about positions to be able to even warrant an opinion. So I like having discussions and debate about that. And I like others to come with ideas as well. Come with an idea, come with solutions. Let's start picking them apart. And that's where the empowerment side really helps to build, good employee relationships. And that is a great correlation to diversity and inclusion. And how do you create that outside of age, race, gender, and you name it?
Yeah, some excellent points here. We've got some comments here that we should share. I'm definitely not saying anyone can be an SDR, but it's a great position to transition from one industry to get into sales. You know what? I'm going to say anyone can be an SDR. Anyone who's willing to pick up the phone and have good conversational skills. I think anyone could be an SDR. You just have to want to actually take on that role, get into that industry, and put in the work. It's so true, having been most likely as old as hire.
Hi, Susan. I just talked to her this morning.
Oh, did you?
Her to join I said, you got to join at noon. You got to chime in.
Yeah. Coachability is a top 3 talent trait. I agree there. That's the one thing I'd have to add about being an SDR. Being coachable is definitely important, right? And I feel like I sell liquor and wine. Yeah, I used to. Back in the day, I used to run cigar bars. And so I would sell liquor with the cigars. Just the perfect cigar, not any cigar.
Right. That's one of the lounges that me and the guy I shouted out earlier, Matt Mulvane, we go to this cigar lounge every week here in town, and it's a cigar paired with a great bourbon or whiskey, and the guy that runs it is great. I mean, it's a great environment. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing off the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a good number of years in the cigar industry, and it's funny that I was treated better early in my career in the cigar industry than I have been as a sales leader. Yeah. So upsell to top shelf. My waitress days on Fire Island, still providing lessons. That's true. There's always the upsell. That's funny. Okay. Anyone could try being an SDR. Pre-predictive revenue, post-predictive revenue. I'm concerned about every SDR and unrealistic expectations placed on them. I agree, Jonathan. SMART goals are so important. They have to be achievable. If you cannot do it yourself, do not ask anyone to do it. If you cannot get on the phone and do that 200 call quota, then how do you really expect anyone else to do it? How do you feel about some of the goals that are out there right now, Ed?
Well, in general, I love the SMART philosophy of going through and defining it. And the The opportunistic side of that is it gives obviously very much a quantitative factor to everything, so you can truly measure improvement. There's also
Hmm.
qualitative side too, where sometimes it can't be measured. It's almost, or if it's measured, it's not measured with the most statistically relevant sampling. So I kind of look at this to say, let's parlay this a bit into diversity and inclusion. So what does that mean? And that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different companies at a lot of different levels. So if you say you want a more diverse team, so define that. Does that mean you don't want all white males? And okay, well, that's fine. So then let's look at what is that going to do? What do you want to bring in? And it starts with this why. So that can be a goal of, may not necessarily meet SMART criteria. You can probably pin it down so it does, but it can also be kind of maybe not a goal, but a guiding initiative of how do you do it. And this is something I think you look around at your team and you start to say, who are the ones that are speaking up in meetings? You gave it about, you were all prepared, you were ready to go, and then didn't get your shot. And certainly that happens, but the leaders there are the ones really got to understand, am I putting an amount of a task or a workload burden on somebody to prepare and then not giving them an opportunity? That's a challenge. And then you start looking at, does that happen consistently or inconsistently? And does it happen with certain people versus all people? And when you start stepping back and looking at some of those things, it becomes apparent maybe where some of the problems are, and the problem may very well be you when you look in the mirror. So I'm kind of going off a little bit of a tangent on a springboard to your question, but I want to wrap this up into the understanding really what the why is. So if a leader, regardless of the level, doesn't understand what the value that diversity brings, and again, diversity can mean a lot of different things, then that's the first step, is to then go try and see what does an outsider's perspective look like? Somebody that's not like me. That can be through age, gender, race. It can be culture. It can also be experience. People that have experience in certain industries or don't. These are the things that you bring into perspective. So those are the things that can start to, I guess, separating the difference between a goal and even a guiding priority is being able to definitively measure versus this is something we just need to kind of embed, or I need to take it upon myself as a personal development to learn a little bit more, or to, talk a little bit more, or start to evaluate when I go attend a web session, who are the panelists and are they all the same? Do they look the same? Do they come from the same industries? Are they in the same positions? At times, I may not get a great diverse perspective in that regard. It may be very closeted. And in a world, especially where everything is consumed digitally now, there's so much information out there. So how do you know what's worth a damn versus what's not? And it's tough to be able to cut through that. But the more you can start, again, opening up and listening and interpreting and kind of making your own decisions, the better, and hopefully the better you can start to mold yourself into being aware of what that means, how to do it intentionally, and then ultimately corral that same method throughout your organization.
Yeah, no, and it's some excellent points there. So we're at 12:29. I told you the time goes so
Yeah,
fast.
you blink.
So if you had three takeaways for our audience, what would they be?
The first is the awareness, and this is a tough one because it requires a lot of you looking at yourself, and it's being aware of how am I handling meetings, who am I calling on in meetings, when I ask for opinions or when I have people present, making sure that you're getting a good perspective from everybody. So I think that's the awareness side, which is difficult. The second is, now that you're aware, then it becomes taking this path of, well, what does better look like? What does that mean if I want to get different perspectives? And that's looking at who's coming into interviews and what questions are being asked in these interviews and who's asking them, and what are you doing with that information? Is it helping you to build a better team, or is it more you're trying to test the candidate? And I think that's a little bit of a difference, to try and understand their perspective and understand the value that they can bring to your organization. So I think that's the second, is starting to then build a model of what that looks like and how that works. And then the third is taking that process throughout everything that's in your span of control, whether you're a individual contributor, whether you're a frontline leader, or whether you're leading a large department, team, organization, is really looking at how are you exemplifying this. And I'll even give a great example. I did this at a previous company when we were producing a product video, and I'm doing this right now with a client. We're building a product video, and we're looking at these animated characters, and the first run was everyone was white male. Well, I lied. There was one female, and it's like we need to make this a little bit more diverse. Let's use different color skin. Let's use different ages, and let's start looking at this from a broader scale. And it's little things like that when trying to produce a product video to say, how do we incorporate the world that we're in and the customers that we're trying to sell to, or the employees that we have? How do we make that more inclusive? And that's something as small as a product video, but that can go down into work presentations or QBRs. And how do you bring in guests, and how do you bring in people to talk? And it's starting to say, these are the different opportunities that people can employ within their span of control, is trying to sample different customer types or different employees, and giving people different opportunities to own projects or give presentations or I guess, kind of own and be accountable to projects.
Yeah, giving people the opportunity to shine, I think, is sort of the way I put it. Like, empower your people to be able to take on new tasks and sort of push themselves and see potential in people, not limitations. And any limitations that you think are there may not actually be there at all. You don't know until you actually dig a little deeper. I think the one thing that I would add, and thank you for your insights, they were amazing, is the idea of culture fit versus culture add. On my last job hunt, the amount of times that I was told I was not the culture fit was a little ridiculous. And when I asked them what a culture fit would look like, they use words that would suggest someone who is male, and maybe I'm bringing my own analysis to it, but I knew they meant not me.
Right.
So, that was crystal clear. So think about, I would ask sales leaders out there to think about what someone different would bring to the table for your teams, and that diversity of thought has power. There's data that backs that up, and it's a proven thing. I'm not making it up, I promise you. So thank you so much for joining me, Ed.
Thank you.
Great comments, and I really appreciate your insights. And so next week, I've got Krister Ungerbuck, I think is how it's pronounced. I'm definitely going to find out before next week. But he's got a book out, and it's about choosing the words you use, changing the words of the world. So I think it's going to be super interesting about leadership and communication. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us live. I really appreciate you. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.